The text message arrived with a small, insistent buzz on the granite countertop where I had set my phone. It was a Monday, which in my house has always meant red beans on the stove, the holy trinity of onion, celery, and bell pepper simmering in the pot Percival bought me for our 10th anniversary. The sound was an intrusion, sharp and digital against the soft bubble of the beans and the low croon of Aaron Neville from the small radio on the windowsill. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked up the phone. The screen was bright. It was a group message, and my daughter-in-law Sabine's name was at the top, along with a half-dozen others I didn't recognize. And then I saw the words that stopped the motion of my hand that seemed to pull all the warmth from the sunlit kitchen. "It's just unbearable sometimes," Sabine had written. "She eats and sleeps for free, and on top of that, I have to manage her whole life. It's a full-time job with no pay." I read the sentence twice. My thumb hovered over the screen, a strange disconnect between the woman I knew, the one who called me Mama Lurl and brought me magnolias from the Garden District, and the words glowing in my hand. A reply from someone named Colette popped up immediately. "OMG Sabine, you are a saint. I could never." Another followed from Tiffany. "Just put her in a home already and get your life back." My first reaction was not anger. It was a profound and sudden quiet. The kind of quiet that falls after a loud noise when your ears are still ringing. The air in the kitchen, moments before fragrant with bay leaf and thyme, suddenly felt thin and metallic. My chest didn't hurt, but it felt hollowed out. A clean, empty space where something vital used to be. I set the phone back down on the counter, screen down. The red beans continued their gentle simmer. Aaron Neville was singing about a yellow moon. Nothing in the room had changed, but the foundation beneath my feet had shifted, a silent, seismic event no one else could feel. I had lived in this house for 45 years. I had paid for it with my husband, Percival, and after he was gone, I had paid for it myself. Every light that switched on, every drop of water from the faucet, was a debt settled by me. The idea that I was living here for free was not just a lie, it was an erasure. It was an attempt to turn my life into a ledger with only one column, liabilities. And I, Lurleen Beauregard Hayes, spent 33 years as a billing supervisor for the city of New Orleans. I know a thing or two about ledgers. Percival and I bought this house in the 7th Ward when it was little more than a promise with good bones. He was a master carpenter, and his hands, broad and calloused, could coax elegance from cypress and oak. He laid the heart pine floors himself, board by board, their surface now worn smooth as river stones by decades of living. My domain was the numbers. I tracked every penny, balanced every statement to the dime. We were a partnership. He built the structure, and I maintained its foundation. When he passed from a heart that had simply worked too hard for too long, the silence in the house was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Our son Michael was already grown and married to Sabine by then. Sabine was a whirlwind. She had ambition that radiated from her like heat. She was a boutique event planner, a creator of curated experiences for people with discretionary income and a need for perfection. When they married, I saw how Michael looked at her, like she was the sun itself, and I wanted my son to have the sun. When Sabine's first business venture failed, leaving her with a mountain of debt to vendors, she came to me, her eyes filled with a carefully calibrated despair. She needed seed money, a fresh start. Percival had left me his classic Buick, a 1957 Roadmaster gleaming black with chrome that could blind you. It was his pride. He'd spent every other Saturday polishing it, his movements a slow, loving ritual. Selling it felt like cutting off a limb. But I saw the hope in my son's face, the belief he had in his wife. So I sold it. The money wasn't a loan, it was a gift, a foundation for their future. Apparently, ambition works both ways. It can build a business, or it can hollow out a home. After the text message, the world continued as if nothing had happened. Michael and Sabine still came for Sunday dinner. She would kiss my cheek, her perfume filling the air, and tell me how wonderful the smothered pork chops smelled. She'd bring me a small, expensive pastry from a bakery uptown and set it on the counter like an offering. I would thank her, my voice even, and watch her move through my kitchen, her confidence a kind of performance. She would rearrange the serving spoons, adjust the flowers in the vase on the table. Small acts of ownership. I started to notice them everywhere. She'd say things like, "Mama Lurl, we really need to get this wiring updated," as if the cost would magically be absorbed by the universe. Or, "I saw the loveliest new gas range at the home show. This old thing is probably a hazard. My old thing had been cooking meals for this family since before she was born. It was not a hazard, it was reliable." But her words were never about the objects themselves. They were about control, about reframing my competence as fragility, my home as her project. I never mentioned the text. To do so would have been to invite a performance of apology, a flood of excuses and theatrical tears that would have drowned the truth. I didn't want a scene. I wanted facts. Grief makes people very easy to persuade, and after Percival's passing, I had been grieving. But I was not a fool. My mind, trained by decades of auditing municipal accounts, had been dormant, not disabled. That text message had flipped a switch. 2 weeks later, an email notification arrived from the Sewerage and Water Board. "Your automatic payment has been processed." I had set up paperless billing years ago to save clutter, but I always kept my own records. I logged into the city utility portal, a system I knew intimately from my years working there. I entered my credentials and pulled up the statement. The amount was correct. The payment date was correct. Then, just to be thorough, I clicked on the payment details. The draft was from my checking account at the credit union. That was also correct, but a flicker of something, a loose thread of a thought, made me click on the payment history. I scrolled back. 1 month, 2 months, a year, 2 years, 33 months. For 33 months, every utility bill for this address, water, electricity, gas, had been drafted directly from my account. Before Michael and Sabine moved in 5 years ago, after her business troubles, we had an agreement. They would live here, in the house Michael grew up in, and they would cover the household expenses. The mortgage had been paid off for a decade, but there were still taxes, insurance, and utilities. It would save them money on rent, allowing them to rebuild their finances, and it would give me company. It seemed sensible. For the first 2 years, Michael would hand me a check on the first of the month. I remembered the last one he gave me. He'd said, "Sabine set up automatic payments for everything, Mama. It'll be easier this way. You don't have to worry about a thing." And I hadn't. I had trusted them. I had trusted my son. I sat there in the quiet of my study, the glow of the monitor lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. The hum of the old computer was the only sound. My throat was dry. This was not a mistake. An error might last a month, maybe 2. 33 months was a system, a deliberate redirection. My money, my pension, and Social Security deposits had been paying for their lives, while Sabine was telling her friends I lived here for free. The lie was not just cruel, it was tactical. It was the narrative she needed to justify the truth. That evening, I did not go to my ledger book. I went to the hall closet where I kept the old file boxes. They were meticulously labeled. Household receipts 2010 to 2015. Appliance warranties. Percival. Medical. I found the one I was looking for. Bank statements 2016 to present. I carried the heavy box to the dining room table, the one Percival built, and I started laying out the pages, month by month, under the warm light of the chandelier. It took me 3 hours. I worked with the methodical patience of a woman who had once found a 7-cent discrepancy in the city's annual water revenue report. The debits were all there, disguised by the cryptic codes of automated clearinghouse transactions. S and WB payment. Entergy autopay. But I knew what they were. I highlighted each one in yellow. Then I took out a calculator and began to add them up. Water, gas, electricity, internet, cable television, home insurance premiums, property taxes. By the time I was finished, the number on the calculator's small screen was just over $27,000. A coldness spread through my limbs, a deep internal chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was the coldness of realization. This was not about covering expenses. This was about funding a lifestyle. Sabine's curated experiences had a cost, and I was the silent, unknowing investor. The next morning, I made a phone call. I dialed a number I knew by heart, the direct line to a senior credit officer at the New Orleans Municipal Employees Credit Union. "Clarice Fontenelle's office," a young woman's voice answered. "May I speak with her, please? This is Lurleen Hayes." There was a brief pause. "Mrs. Hayes, of course. One moment." Clarice and I went way back. We'd sat on the same audit review committees for 15 years. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a mind for numbers that was as keen as my own. She came on the line, her voice warm but professional. "Lurl, it's good to hear your voice. It's been too long. Everything all right?" "I'm fine, Clarice. Thank you for asking. I need a bit of professional advice if you have a moment." "For you? I have all the time in the world. What's on your mind?" I didn't want to lay it all out over the phone. Discretion was paramount. "I have some questions about how certain automatic drafts are set up. It's a bit complicated. I was wondering if I could come in." "Of course," she said, her tone shifting slightly, sensing the seriousness in mine. "Could you be here at 10? My first appointment just rescheduled." 10 o'clock is perfect," I said. "Thank you, Clarice." "Don't you mention it, Lurl. I'll see you then." I hung up the phone and looked at the stack of highlighted bank statements on my dining room table. They felt heavy, not just with the weight of the paper, but with the weight of the deception they represented. I put them in a thick manila envelope. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The quiet after the text message had been confusion. This was different. This was clarity. The credit union was cool and quiet, smelling faintly of clean carpets and paper. The silence was punctuated by the soft tap of keyboards and the low hum of the air conditioning. Mrs. Fontenelle met me just past the security desk. She was a handsome woman, her salt and pepper hair cut in a neat, stylish bob. She wore a tailored navy blue suit that spoke of competence. She led me back to her office, a glass-walled room that looked out over the main floor. "Have a seat, Lurl," she said, closing the door behind us. "Coffee? Water?" "Water would be lovely, thank you." She poured a glass from a pitcher on her credenza and set it on a coaster in front of me. She then sat opposite me, her hands folded on her blotter, her expression patient and attentive. She did not rush me. I took a sip of water, the cold glass a comfort to my hand. "Clarice, I'm going to be direct because I know you value efficiency. For the past 33 months, all the household utilities for my home have been drafted from my personal checking account. The agreement was that my son and his wife, who live with me, would be paying those bills." I slid the manila envelope across the polished surface of her desk. "These are my statements. I've highlighted the relevant debits." Clarice put on a pair of reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck and opened the envelope. She pulled out the top few pages, her eyes scanning the columns of numbers. Her lips pursed in concentration. She was silent for a long time, turning over each page slowly. The only sound was the rustle of the paper. I watched her face, saw the way her brow furrowed, the slight, almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. She was not just seeing numbers, she was seeing a pattern. Finally, she looked up at me, her gaze sharp and serious. "This is comprehensive, Lurl. The total is significant." "I know," I said quietly. She leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her blotter. "You said they were supposed to have set up automatic payments from their own account." "That is what my son told me." Clarice was quiet for another moment, her eyes fixed on something over my shoulder as if she were running calculations in her head. Then she leaned forward, a new and troubling light in her eyes. "Lurl," she began, her voice lower now. "This might be connected to something else. I don't want to cause you undue alarm, but I think you need to be aware. I had an underwriting query flag my desk a few days ago on a business loan application." She paused. The applicant was Sabine Hayes. My blood ran cold. It was a physical sensation, a sudden drop in temperature that started in my chest and radiated outward to my fingertips. A business loan. "What kind of loan?" I managed to ask, my voice thin. It was a significant line of credit to cover outstanding vendor payments and fund an expansion. She saw the look on my face. There was a judgment against her business, Lurl, for about $185,000. The room seemed to shrink. The air grew thick and heavy. $185,000. The money from Percival's Buick was a drop in the ocean of that kind of debt. So she was still in trouble. Deep trouble. The application was unusual, Clarice continued, choosing her words with care. That's why it was flagged for manual review. On her personal financial statement, she listed her household expenses as zero. Zero? Zero, Clarice confirmed. She stated that she lives with a dependent family member who covers all costs of the home. In the addendum, she named you, Lurleen Hayes, as the dependent. The word hung in the air between us. Dependent. A person sustained by another. A burden. The same narrative from the text message, now codified on a legal document. She eats and sleeps for free. It wasn't just gossip for her friends, it was a financial strategy. I felt a wave of nausea, swift and sickening. I took another sip of water, focusing on the simple physical act. The glass was cold, the water was clean. I was sitting in a solid chair. I needed to ground myself in facts, not in the dizzying spin of betrayal. "Clarice," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "May I see the application?" She hesitated. "Lurl, that's confidential client information." "I am named in the application," I stated, not as a question, but as a fact. As a dependent. That makes me a party to the information presented. I believe I have a right to see how my name and my financial situation are being represented to this institution. Clarice looked at me, her expression a mixture of professional caution and personal sympathy. She saw the old auditor in my eyes, the woman who did not back down from a ledger that didn't add up. After a moment, she nodded slowly. "Let me see what I can do," she said. There were 3 applications, actually. She applied here, and also with 2 of our partner lenders. They were all routed through our system. She turned to her computer, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. A few clicks, a password entry, and then she fell silent again, reading what was on her screen. After a full minute, she turned the monitor toward me. "Here," she said. "This is the personal financial statement she submitted with all 3. I leaned forward. It was a standard form. Assets, liabilities, income, expenses. I saw her name, her business name, Michael's name. I saw the loan amounts she was requesting. And then I saw the section on household income. It listed her projected business revenue, Michael's salary as an architect, and a 3rd-line item, other income. The amount listed was exactly the monthly total of my pension and Social Security direct deposits. My breath caught in my throat. She listed my retirement income as her own? As part of the total household income, Clarice clarified gently, to demonstrate capacity to service the new debt. It was brazen. It was a level of deceit I could scarcely comprehend. She had not only been using my money to pay her bills, she was using my identity to secure her future. To the bank, I was not Lurleen Hayes, retired city employee and owner of my home. I was an asset, a column of numbers on her balance sheet, a dependent who conveniently came with her own income stream. And then I saw it. Tucked into the supporting documents was a scanned copy of a bank statement. It was meant to look like Sabine's, but the layout was familiar, too familiar. The font used for the transaction descriptions, the specific placement of the date column. It was a statement from my credit union. My pension deposit was clearly visible, but at the top of the page, my name and address had been clumsily replaced with hers. It was a forgery, a bad one, to an expert eye. The alignment was off by a fraction of an inch. The font of the pasted text was a sans serif, while the bank's was a classic serif. It was the kind of detail a civilian might miss, but to someone who had spent a lifetime verifying documents, it screamed. "That's my statement," I said, my voice a flat, hollow thing. "She's pasted her name over mine." Clarice nodded grimly. I suspected as much. The originals are all electronic now, but the metadata on the file she uploaded was irregular. The creation date didn't match the statement date. That was the first red flag for the underwriters. I leaned back in the chair, the full scope of it washing over me. It was a meticulous, multi-layered deception. The automatic drafts to pay the bills, which lowered her expenses. The claim of me as a dependent, which further improved her debt-to-income ratio. The forged statement to inflate her household cash flow. It was all part of a single, desperate plan to get that loan, to save her business and her reputation. And then I understood something. It wasn't personal, not in the way I had first thought. The cruelty in the text message was not the goal. It was a byproduct. It was the story she had to tell herself and her friends to make the rest of it palatable. If I was a helpless, dependent old woman living off her charity, then what she was doing wasn't theft. It was reimbursement. It was a twisted kind of justice in her own mind. I looked at Clarice. Her face was etched with concern. "Lurl, what do you want to do?" I thought about Michael, my son, his quiet pride, his deep love for this woman who was so full of fire and ambition. Did he know? I searched my memory for clues. His easy assumption that the bills were handled, his relief at not having to worry about my finances. No, I did not believe he knew the specifics. He might have known they were in financial trouble, but he would never have countenanced this. He would have been horrified. His blindness was one of love, not complicity. But that was a separate heartbreak, one I would have to deal with later. Right now, I had to deal with the facts. "The underwriting call," I said, my voice gaining strength. "When is it scheduled for?" Clarice checked her calendar. 9 days from now. 9 days. "I need copies of everything, Clarice," I said. "The 3 loan applications, the forged statement, everything you can give me." "Lurl, this is a matter for our fraud department now," she said gently, "and possibly the police." "I understand that," I replied, meeting her gaze, "and I will cooperate fully with your department. But before this becomes a formal investigation, I need to handle something myself, in my own way, please." She saw the resolve in my eyes. She knew me well enough to know I was not a woman given to hysterics or rash decisions. I was a woman who balanced her books, and this book was so far out of balance it threatened to bring the whole house down. She gave a small, resigned sigh. "All right, Lurl, I'll have our legal department review what can be released to you as a directly affected party. But you must understand, the credit union will have to take action to protect itself. The loans will be denied and an internal investigation is now mandatory." "I expect nothing less," I said. "Thank you, Clarice. You've been a true friend." "You just take care of yourself," she said, her professional mask slipping for a moment to reveal the warm, genuine concern beneath. I left the credit union with a thick new envelope in my tote bag. It felt much heavier than the one I had brought in. The sun outside was bright, the New Orleans air thick with humidity. The world looked the same, but my place in it felt different. I was no longer a woman living in quiet retirement. I was a woman with a file. Over the next week, I moved with a quiet purpose. I contacted my cousin Renee, who worked as a paralegal for a firm on Poydras Street. I met her for coffee and laid out the situation, showing her the documents. She was aghast, her indignation a fierce, protective fire on my behalf. "Tante Lurl, This is grand larceny, she said, her voice a low, angry hiss. It's identity theft. It's bank fraud. We can ruin her. I don't want to ruin her, Renee, I said calmly. That's Michael's wife. Ruining her would ruin him. I just want to correct the record. I want the truth to be entered into the ledger. She helped me understand the legal ramifications. The vendor judgment against Sabine's business was a civil matter, but the loan applications were criminal. The forgery was irrefutable. Renee advised me to let the bank handle the fraud claim, which would nullify the applications without requiring me to press charges directly. It was a clean, precise solution. It was the solution of an auditor. I also spoke to Mr. Thibodeau, our old postal carrier who had retired a few years back but still knew everyone and everything that happened in the 7th Ward. I met him on his porch, 2 streets over, where he was tending to his prize-winning roses. I didn't tell him the details, only that I was having some trouble with Sabine and that I was worried about Michael. He listened, his weathered face thoughtful, and simply said, "Lurleen, you were always the strong one. Percival knew that. You do what you have to do. Your boy will find his way back to the truth. He's a good man. He just got lost in a bright light." His simple faith in my son was a small comfort, a tiny flicker of warmth in the cold reality I was facing. The day of the confrontation arrived. It was a Saturday. Sabine was hosting a vendor showcase at her new boutique event space in the warehouse district. It was the culmination of all her work, the physical manifestation of the business I had helped fund with Percival's car. An invitation, printed on thick, creamy cardstock, had been on my mantelpiece for a month. Sabine Hayes Events presents a curated afternoon. I dressed carefully. A simple navy blue dress, my good leather handbag, and the small pearl earrings Percival had given me for our 40th anniversary. I did not want to look like a victim. I wanted to look like myself. I took a cab to the address. The boutique was on a gentrified street, all exposed brick and large plate glass windows. Inside, it was a sea of white. White linens, white orchids, white Chiavari chairs. Waiters in black moved silently through the crowd with trays of champagne flutes. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. A few dozen potential clients, dressed in expensive weekend attire, drifted through the space, admiring floral arrangements and sample table settings. I saw Sabine across the room. She was holding court, a radiant smile on her face, her gestures animated as she described a vision for someone's perfect wedding. She looked beautiful and successful and completely at ease. My heart ached for my son, for the dream he thought he was living. I waited. I did not approach her while she was with clients. I found a quiet corner near a display of wedding cakes and stood patiently. After about 15 minutes, she finished her conversation and turned, catching my eye. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face before she replaced it with a bright public smile. She glided toward me. "Mama Lurl, what a surprise. I didn't think you'd make it." Her voice was a little too loud, a little too cheerful. "I wouldn't miss it, Sabine," I said quietly. "Well, it's a madhouse. I can't talk long. Is everything okay?" She glanced around, already distracted by a client waving at her from across the room. "I need a moment of your time," I said. "It's important." "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of the biggest event of my career here." She was trying to be dismissive, to manage me like a minor inconvenience. "No," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It cannot." Something in my tone must have finally gotten through to her. She looked at me properly for the first time, and the social smile faltered. She led me to a small, empty alcove behind a large floral display. "What is it?" she asked, her voice clipped with impatience. "Mama Lurl, you're embarrassing me. People are watching." "I think they will be far more embarrassed for you in a moment," I replied, my voice level. I reached into my handbag and took out the file folder Cousin Renee had helped me prepare. I didn't hand it to her. I stepped over to a small empty table draped in white linen and set it down. I opened it. The first page on top was a summary sheet. On one side, a list of the 33 months of utility and household payments drafted from my account, with a final, circled total. On the other side, a list of the 3 loan applications, the amounts requested, and my name listed as dependent. Sabine stared at it. The color drained from her face. I watched it happen. The rosy glow of the successful hostess replaced by a pale, sickly gray. Her composure, which had always been her greatest armor, began to crack. I don't know what this is," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape. "I think you do," I said. I calmly flipped the summary page over, revealing the first of my highlighted bank statements. "This is the water bill for last month, paid from my account." I revealed the next. "This is the electricity, also from my account." I continued page by page, a slow, deliberate rhythm of revelation. Property taxes, homeowners insurance, for almost 3 years. Her hands began to tremble. She wrapped her arms around herself as if a sudden chill had entered the room. "Michael and we were going to pay you back," she whispered, her voice thin and reedy. "It was just temporary, until the business turned around." "Was it also temporary when you listed me as a dependent on your loan applications?" I asked, my voice holding no anger, only a quiet demand for the truth. I slid the first application on top of the pile. My name was clearly visible in the box. Her eyes widened. She looked utterly cornered. "The bank! They don't understand. You live with us. It's just paperwork." "It's fraud, Sabine," I said. And then I placed the final document on the table. The forged bank statement with the clumsy paste of her name over mine. "And this is forgery." She stared at the paper as if it were a snake. All the fight went out of her. Her shoulders slumped. The ambitious, radiant event planner was gone, replaced by a frightened woman who had been caught. "How did you find out?" she breathed. "You have to be very careful with group texts," I said simply. Just then, a figure appeared in the doorway of the alcove. It was Clarice Fontenelle. She was not in her work suit, but in a simple, elegant dress, looking like just another guest. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod in my direction. Her presence was a silent confirmation. The bank knew. The system knew. It was over. Sabine saw her, and a small, choked sob escaped her lips. She finally understood. This was not a family disagreement. This was a financial reckoning. The curated afternoon she had worked so hard to create had just been dismantled, piece by piece, by a quiet old woman with a file folder. I did not stay to watch the rest. My part was done. I turned and walked away, leaving her there with the evidence of her choices laid out on the white linen. As I walked through the beautiful, fraudulent room, I felt no triumph, only a deep and profound sadness. The cost of this correction was my son's happiness. It was a debt I wasn't sure how I would ever be able to pay. The aftermath was quiet. Clarice handled everything with the bank. The loan applications were officially denied and flagged for fraud. Sabine's business was now under internal review by the credit union's legal team, a cloud that would likely prevent her from securing financing anywhere else. The vendor judgment was now hers and hers alone to solve. The day after the showcase, I went to the credit union. Clarice met me personally and walked me through the process of opening a new set of accounts. We established a new checking account, a new savings account. I filled out the forms to have my pension and Social Security rerouted to the new numbers. I was given a new debit card. I went home and spent the afternoon online, methodically changing the payment information for my own personal bills, my supplemental health insurance, my small life insurance policy. I was disentangling myself, line by line, from the web she had woven. I was securing my own foundation. Michael called me that evening. His voice was strained, heavy with a pain I knew all too well. "Mama," he said, "Sabine told me everything." I waited. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know the extent of it. I knew we were struggling, but I never. His voice broke. I am so sorry. I know you didn't, Michael, I said, and I did. But the question is, what happens now? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his ragged breathing. She's my wife, Mama. I know, I said softly, and in that moment I understood. He had made his choice. He would stand by her. He would try to help her fix the mess she had made. I could not fault him for his loyalty, even if it was painfully misplaced, but it meant something between us was broken. The easy trust, the shared assumption of integrity, it was gone. They moved out a week later. They didn't say much. The process was tense and quiet. I stayed in my room listening to the sounds of boxes being taped, of furniture scraping against the floorboards Percival had laid. When they were finally gone, the house was still and silent. The silence was different this time. It wasn't the aching silence of grief I felt after Percival died. It was the clean, empty silence of a ledger that has finally been balanced. There are no more Sunday dinners. I have not seen my son in 3 months. Sometimes I receive short, polite text messages from him. Thinking of you, Mama. Hope you're well. I reply in kind. We are like strangers circling the wreckage of a life we once shared. I lost a daughter. I lost the easy comfort of my son's presence. The price of the truth was high. But I have my house. I have my name. I have my dignity. Some evenings I sit on my front porch, the iron gate closed. The scent of my night-blooming jasmine fills the air. I listen to the sounds of the 7th Ward, the distant clang of the streetcar, the laughter of children playing down the block, the faint rhythm of a second-line drum practice. I make red beans on Mondays, just for myself, and when I look at the statements that arrive from my new bank account, the numbers all add up. Every debit is accounted for. Every credit is my own. The ledger is clean. And in the quiet accounting of my own life, that is a kind of peace,